What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Get Paid for Your Pad. Well, a couple of weeks ago or last week, we spoke with Nick, who had his an Airbnb burned to the ground. If you haven't listened to that story, I highly recommend listening to it. And that has inspired me to find a safety expert in the short-term rental field. And so today's guest is Vincent Niemeth. He is an absolute expert in when it comes to safety and liability. Focuses on helping people in the short-term rental space make sure that the properties are safe. He holds a degree in occupational health and safety. He also served as the head of safety for a very large property management company for a long time, with over 3,000 properties. So there's nobody better to speak to on this topic of safety than Vincent. So Vincent, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being on here and was looking forward to it all week.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I'm excited to learn. I know you have some interesting stories to share. You have a lot of tips and advice. You also wrote a book, which I have here in right in front of me, as Vincent was so generous to send me a copy. The book is called Safe Havens: Essential Safety for Short-Term Rental and Transient Rental Properties. You've also founded a company called Safe Havens Properties. So definitely a lot going on there. So yeah, why don't you give us a quick background on how did you get involved in safety and then specifically in short-term rentals?
Sure, sure. I guess my entry into this space is sort of unconventional. Not that anybody really has a conventional entry into this type of market, but my background is actually really in music. I grew up and my father was in construction and commercial development, and I think he kind of wanted me to follow the sort of a path where maybe I entered the trades, became an electrician or something to work in that type of construction industry. But my passions were with music, and I wanted to just had the creative juices flowing and sort of followed that path. I owned a music store in Western Pennsylvania. I'm from Pittsburgh for a while, and mostly focused on lessons, music education for students, and had a nice business there. And but I always was sort of coming back to sort of the construction and real estate, and as I sort of transitioned out of owning that business, I actually became a realtor. I became an agent and new agent, and as you start to go into that industry, you kind of figure out what your niche is. And I started to work with a lot of investors and home flippers, people who were looking for certain properties to invest in, rental properties, and then worked along with them. Started to, because I had some knowledge of construction, I started getting into inspection, was working for some insurance companies, met someone in the insurance industry that was underwriting a lot of large, high value homes, wanted someone to sort of inspect and because these homes are very large and complicated, some have a lot of amenities. They're hard to underwrite insurance policies for. So I started doing a lot of risk loss type evaluation of these properties. It just keeps evolving into just constantly evaluating properties. Started to pursue a master's in occupational safety and health. And safety is, again, like all was really just becoming very passionate about this as well. Um, COVID happened. I was working for a luxury home builder down in Florida Lakewood Ranch area. Again, evaluating their properties, working with the new owners of these properties to make sure that they were comfortable and happy with their home. And then ended up taking a position. I just sort of fell into it with a large host type company at 1,500 properties at that time. We're just rapidly growing, just grabbing up as many properties they could and expanding in all kinds of area in every area across the country. Was evaluating their properties, making sure they were meeting jurisdictional compliance. They were acquiring existing short-term rental properties. They were starting their own brand new ones from scratch, buying homes and going through the whole process of onboarding the property for, decor and design, and then eventually safety. Just loved the short term rental space. Just saw all of its all the potential there. That's why I love your podcast, Jasper, because it's so revenue focused, and it's always about maximizing as much as you can out of the property, whether it's getting more occupancy, choosing the right area. So I just really gravitated towards that space, and having a background in safety and construction, I kind of realized there were some limitations here. Like everything was, we were chatting before, like hospitality, STRs is always associated with hospitality, but it was sort of, hospitality, you always thought of hotels and motels. And then with the rise of Airbnb, it really just forked off, it branched in this whole segment of Airbnbs where it just was becoming so rapidly growing and becoming its own animal in the hospitality industry. But as I was looking through the history of it, safety wasn't really evolving for these properties. It was like people were making anything they could in Airbnb, like yurts. Everybody was throwing around the term yurts. It's like that's a tent. That's like probably one of the most unsafe conditions you can put a guest in. So I really just focused on safety, having this background in property evaluation. I just said, what can I do to really get out there, work with owners and managers to make sure they're just maximizing their guest experience by putting a real safe property, showing real responsible operations, and mitigating risk, and really help enhancing that guest experience. So that's where I am today. And I put the book together earlier this year, more or less, as a tool for I love to work with new owners and potential investors in the STR space, and just say, hey, this isn't out here to scare you. These are things that you really want to look for, build a plan around, and use this to put a safe and habitable and great experience out there for your guests.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned you've reviewed like thousands of properties. You've been in
Sure.
the safety space, I guess, for over 10 years. You mentioned you had some interesting funny stories. So I would love to start with the funny stories, and then we can go into like some learning lessons and some tips and advice for short-term rental operators out there. What are some of the most important things to look at and to be aware of? So, but let's start with some stories.
Sure. I mean, obviously, guest. I always tell people like it always has to start with good guest screening. So a lot of people, especially like in the luxury STR space, they could, we're going to get a better client in here. It's a higher value property. No riffraff is going to rent this, but you would be surprised that if you're in a 13, 15 higher occupancy property, a lot of college kids or young guys are going to get enough money to fork out whatever $10,000 or $11,000 a week for rent that place, and they're going to get in there, and their one goal is to party. And so we had a property. The owner, it was in the Tahoe region, and the owner comes by and he's like, I think there's a party going on there. And so obviously we did use some things, as we'll talk about later, as I can bring up, is party squasher and device counter. We can see there's a lot of active devices on the property. So the field person gets out there, and they're like, everybody's gone. There's a couple people passed out. She's walking through the property. There's a person passed out in this room. There's another person passed out in the other room. But she's like, there's a lot of furniture missing. And now this particular property, it was we were managing this property. The owners in that area had spent a lot of money on this custom log furniture. It was just made by an artist. It was in a very attractive design, fit with the decor. Tahoe, a lot of that rustic lodgy type feel. Well, there's at that point there's an incredible bonfire going in the backyard. and the field person, she's like, I don't know where this furniture is. She's like, I'm looking at, a lot of it is gone. She's like, they're going to be really upset. And I said, she goes out back. Well, we found out where the furniture was. It was literally the fuel for the bonfire in the back. So again, I always say, like, screening your tenants is really important. in my book, I have a little section on trust and safety, which is important, and part of that is the rise of the social media influencer. And as we discussed before, there are two types of social media influencers. The one that's really going to promote and um, bring a lot of attention to your property, and then there's the destructive social media influencer who's going to go in there and do basically criminal and destructive activity to garner likes or follows on social media. But as I always tell a lot of owners, you have to be you're always on the defensive. Another funny story is one of my first days I was working for this company. They said, we have a safety incident, take a look at. Somebody had jumped up, big property, large island. Somebody jumped up and tried to swing from the chandelier over the island. Well, obviously the chandelier came out of the ceiling. They fell, they hit their head off the island. Immediately were facing litigation, complaints, bad reviews, everything, the whole works. And they said, we're going to sue us. And I'm like, under what grounds do you have to bring anything against us over what has happened? This was clearly just reckless behavior, and he said, well, the light should have been secured into the ceiling better. So it's like, okay, you jumped up, you swung from the chandelier, you fell, you hurt yourself. Now we're on the defensive because we didn't have a properly secured light. So you see a lot of things. I always tell owners, I don't care whether you have like $150 a night or $3,000 a night property, you're going to be facing some of the same behavior and situations sometimes.
Right. So let's backtrack a little bit. Let's go back to that first story. So you mentioned like the destructive influencer. Like was this a case of a destructive influencer who wanted to basically get more follows by lighting up someone's furniture in the backyard, or?
So it's hard to tell, when you don't really know that this is happening till, their device counter is going off. You have 100 devices on site, everybody's descended on the property. People are filming. It's going to end up on social media somewhere. So it's always hard to tell whether that person was doing it to for themselves or there were other people there doing it. It just turned into a really bad situation. What did we do in that? I mean, it was really hard. But the owners are obviously upset. They had this furniture custom made, and for their property, it was a big part of the aesthetic nature of the property. And now it is just a pile of ashes in the backyard. And how do you really explain that to them?
Did you guys end up getting the furniture refunded by the guests?
Yeah, we ended up. It became we ended up having to replace it basically, not with the same, but through either giving them some money for the value of the furniture and also putting new decor in the home.
And were you guys refunded by insurance, or were you able to claim it from the guests?
Yeah, at that point, it sort of went out of my hands, and I was just trying to figure out how to best deal with not having this happen again. And really, it's so hard with guests because it's almost like you never know what's going to happen, and until it happens. And part of safety is you always want to have that proactive mindset, but then now you're forced to react in a situation like this, and it's just like, what do you do? And but unfortunately, it's like, I think some of those homeowners in that respect, realize there's a certain degree of risk here involved when you're letting people come into your home. But have you ever thought in a million years, are they going to take all your furniture out in the backyard and burn it? Probably not. But there's a first time for everything.
So what can we do to prevent these type of things from happening?
Yeah, again, guest screening is a huge thing. I'm sure you've talked about it on your podcast before, but really there are so many ways to really screen tenants. It's time consuming, but it's really your first line at mitigating risk from a guest that's going to come in there and potentially do damage. And you look at their social medias is a big place to start if you can find them on there. One thing that I learned in the past is that sometimes people, they rent these places because they want parties. They don't want to party in their home. They don't want their own home being destroyed. So let's go rent an Airbnb and party in there. So, it's a little bit of detective work. You got to sort of put on your private investigator hat, but at the end of the day, if it's, it could save you a really catastrophic loss. And I always tell
Mm-hmm.
owners this too. There's so many. Just don't rely on social media. There are other, comb the public records. The district courts in many areas post their records. Look them up. Have they added any past court cases or convictions for just vandalism or theft or any type of destructive activity? It's immediate red flag. Just not a good guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned party squashers. So there are a number of tools that can help us prevent these type of things, right? For us at Free Wild, what we use is we recently started using StayFi, which is not which is not really a safety tool, but it does allow you to see how many people are connected to the Wi-Fi. So
Right,
that
right.
is one clue, right? If you have 4 guests and there's 12 people connected to the Wi-Fi, it's like, okay, well, something's going on, right? We have the noise aware devices to monitor the noise. And then for guest screening, we actually use AutoHost. Not sure if you're familiar with
Uh,
AutoHost, but that's a
no, no, not
really
that one in
nice tool.
particular. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I.
AutoHost is a really cool tool. Sorry,
Oh no,
I
that's
was just
fine.
gonna give a little
Yeah,
bit of context on
I
AutoHost.
think
What they
as a property owner, like the and manager, the Internet of Things, as they call it, has just expanded so much. It's been such a game changer in the short term rental space. From party squasher and device counting tools, the noise monitors. I know you had some people from Windon that had smoke. You could tell if someone was actually smoking in the property, which is fantastic type device to have. And even basic things like leak detection. I tell a lot of people from property evaluation standpoint, we've had people just guests leave their kids, just had the faucets running in the bathroom, and they're running a couple days before somebody gets over there to do a post stay inspection. The faucet's just running full bore. And from an environmental standpoint, I always say mold can start growing in a moisture rich or water infiltration type environment in less than 48 hours. So you really, leak detectors are, might seem kind of a minor thing, but actually could be really beneficial, especially like in a larger property or in coastal areas.
Well, how do the leak detectors? How does that work?
So it's just a small device. You can place it near any type of water source. I usually tell owners the best place to put them is in your sink cabinets, underneath the bathroom sinks, or because that's usually a leaking faucet, or like a supply line is usually going to be something that could damage your property from like a mold standpoint. But also, if it's somebody just leaves the water on, it's going to eventually detect that, and you can get in there and prevent a disaster.
Mm,
They're cheap,
interesting.
they're really inexpensive, but can really save you a lot of money.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you kind of assuming that's not going to happen, but then if it does happen, then you're happy that you had those
Yeah,
things
yeah, for
to let
sure.
you know, right?
I
Well,
always kind of
let's
tell. Oh, I'm sorry.
go for it.
I always kind of tell guests, like, safety is it's like, safety and revenue do go hand in hand. It's kind of like an extended car warranty. Why do I want to pay all this money for something I may never use? Well, with safety, you're not, there isn't one. I always tell owners there isn't one safety measure that's going to cost you more than what you're going to give up in refunds, or bad reviews, or having to go all the way through litigation or filing a claim. A lot of safety measures are really inexpensive, but they could save you the potential to save you a lot of money, or mitigate risk, or avoiding lost revenue is so great. Like, you should think about these things. You should make them a priority,
Hmm.
because um, they're that important.
One very cheap way to make your home safer that I learned about a couple months ago, I think it was, is if you have carpets, there's like these little sticky things that you put underneath the carpet, so it attaches to the floor, and so like you can't slip on the
Right.
carpet. Like
Yeah.
it
I
does.
mean, it's funny. I actually address furniture and decor in my book a little bit. simply for the fact that I had working at a company where 3,000 properties Monday morning after all the big weekend occupancies and stays, you'd always get the incidents reports and notifications sort of start filtering in, and you're looking at them, and after a while a certain theme starts to develop, like what is being reported the most. Pools always are number one. Pools and hot tubs are always going to be a number one source of an incident or complaint or safety issue. Furniture is actually number two, because with a lot of owners, I know, like, when you're setting up your property and you get sort of lured by a lot of really cool and trendy furniture that you can get at very good prices, like on Amazon or Wayfair, but it's going to make a really aesthetically really pleasing, but how much can this furniture really take from wear and tear? So bar stools might look super great, but after a few stays, they might, even if it's not well made, it's going to start loosening up, and then eventually it's going to lead. I can't even count how many times somebody said they sat on a bar stool and it collapsed and they got hurt. And it's like, they get out there and it's like, we looked at the bar stool and it's like, well, this is just sort of a cheaply made bar stool, and now we have to replace it. Well, okay, maybe we should think about taking a look at buying a little better furniture, just so that it can take the abuse that it gets from stay to stay. So I know it's easy, and when you're setting up, everybody might be on a limited budget, but it's just one thing you have to encounter. You want to put a lot of area rugs down, great, they look really cool, but when you're coming in that door or you're coming out of the pool and it's wet and you come in through the slider, and if there isn't something sticky under the carpet, you're gonna go airborne on that thing, and you're gonna potentially get hurt. And again, there's another incident to deal with. And it's so again, like you said, something simple, just like putting something under the carpet, might seem you might not think about how important it is until the time when actually something does happen.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing with safety. It's like you don't realize what's necessary until something happens, right? But you mentioned pools and hot tubs are the number one category where there's incidents, right? So let's dive a little deeper into that. Like, what are some safety measures that we should absolutely have in place if we have a hot tub and or a pool?
Yeah, that's great. I love to talk about pools and hot tubs. Always was a number one incident reported whenever there was a complaint or safety issue or someone was injured. Pools, hot tubs, you have to look at them. They're a combination of risks. They have they're tripping and slip hazards. They're drowning hazards. They're health hazards if they're not cleaned properly. And so they have, like, it's the number one amenity everybody looks for, but it's also the one that's going to could cause you the most grief if you're not maintaining it properly. So first of all, like, it's this was always sort of a little bit turn of an argument. And I had spent some time, I met with some really big national pool cleaning companies. And I said, look, how often do you need to clean these pools? We get a lot of people that are complaining about rashes and gastrointestinal issues, and the pool's not clean. And they said, regardless of whatever your cleaning schedule is, that pool needs to be cleaned between every stay. That should be no exceptions. That's what it needs to be done. They said simply entering a pool, one person entering a pool or a group of people entering a pool as little as 15 times can affect the pH in the pool to an unhealthy level. So that chemistry needs to be adjusted. You need to do it between stays. The one thing that I always tell people, glass is such the invisible, that's the invisible thread in a pool. Everybody loves to get in the pool. They're having a glass of wine, they're drinking, glass breaks, piece of it goes in the pool. It's invisible at that point almost. You can't see it. And if you're not getting in there and cleaning that pool between, cleaners aren't going to see it. So then what happens? Kids get in the pool, people get in the pool, they get cut. And now you have an incident on your hands. So cleaning the pools, between stays, it should be just part of your process. I know some people say, well, I just can't afford to do that, or I don't. Pool cleaners are very abundant trade. There's a lot of them out there, and and it's not an expensive thing to have done, and it's definitely worth it. Hot tubs, freestanding hot tubs are another. They turn into these biological soups of unhealthy water because they just never really get drained out and cleaned. They just have more chemicals added to them constantly, and combined with heat, they just turn into really nasty environments. And I always say that, and people say it's all impossible. I can't do it. I'm like, yeah, you can do it. If you're going to spend this money to put this freestanding hot tub in there, you need to drain it every other month in a slow season, and you need to drain it every month and refill it in a busy season to keep that water at a healthy level. It sounds like a lot, but trust me, it's going to go a long way, because I've seen so many rashes and illnesses from people getting in these hot tubs that have never had the water changed. I mean, years, thousands of guests, never had the water changed. There's more chemicals dumped into it to try to get it into some sort of manageable, clean level. And that's not the way to do it. And then, baseline through your insurance when properties are being purchased or sold. Insurance companies always look, the pool has to have a self-closing gate or fence around it. That's pretty much the code and standard in almost all areas. But I think as owners and managers, you really got to go a little step further. You got to put door alarms on in the homes, especially when children are staying there. And what that is, if you don't know, it's just if a door to the pool gets open, it sounds an alarm. You can just prevents a child from, undetected child from going out into the pool and maybe falling in and drowning. You can go a step further than that too. In pool alarms are just devices that float in the pool, and it detects motion into the pool. It sounds an alarm. You can check. Great things, very inexpensive, really just great at mitigating risk and preventing incidents. So, they're, like I said, they're just a combination of hazards, but there's a lot of cheap and effective ways to really just mitigate all that risk around them. And like I said, so many people say, I just want to put a pool in my Airbnb. Great, do it. But this is the things you need to do, and these are the things you need to consider when you do it.
Mm-hmm. Sure. What are some other things that come to mind where it's easy to prevent? It's not very expensive, but most property managers don't consider it. Do you have any more examples of that?
Yeah, and you'd be surprised. It's probably some of the most important things, like smoke alarms and fire extinguishers. So, how many times I go into properties and it's like they have no accessible fire extinguishers, or they're 20 years old and the smoke alarms haven't had the batteries changed. So it's why jurisdictions are so important about, keeping on fire safety, especially now we're entering fire season in forested areas like in Tahoe and Big Bear. So you really, keeping your defensible space clean. They've really just, and it just seems like in the last few years, a lot of jurisdictions on regulations on STRs have really pushed, moving away from just the traditional battery powered smoke alarm to interconnected smoke alarms and hardwired smoke alarms. And even like in places like Washoe County and Tahoe, that you have to have if your occupancy is above, say 13, I think it is, you have to have a monitored system in there where it actually notifies the fire alarm or the fire company when the smoke alarm goes off. So again, fire prevention, I'm huge on. My biggest fear and why I got into this is really, I always worry about children being hurt in homes, properties, and that's something that I just take it on as a personal mission to really, make sure that children, especially children, are safe and in homes and properties. And fire safety, number one. You really cannot skimp, avoid, not think about. You always want to be thinking about fire safety. One, always, just always.
Mm-hmm. So, do you have any other just like little small things like a carpet? The sticky thing under the carpet. I thought was so interesting because that's so cheap, and it can prevent like somebody from getting really hurt, right? So
Yeah.
can you think of other like just small little things that people that's kind of no brainers to install?
Yeah, well, one thing, and I know this I guess I'm only really relying on all the properties I evaluate and what I see of the trends, and definitely, things like that. I always tell people, like, walk through your property. If you think it's unsafe, if you think somebody might get hurt on it, they probably will. it's just the nature of
Hmm.
the you're letting all these strangers in here every week or whatever. Not everything is foolproof, but GFI outlets, if you're aware of those, are the outlets that are if you, that have breakers in them that actually trip if they become in contact with water. I see so many properties that don't have these. I don't know how they miss, because it's usually a pretty key code item that, when you're getting your permit or renewing your permit. But you have to think about it. Everybody that comes, they come on vacation, they have everything they plug in today. They plug in their phone, their laptop, their iPad, whatever. Everything they carry with them has a charger and they plug it in. But if these aren't close to a water source, they're like an immediate shock hazard. And, kids get out of the pool, they want to plug in their iPad, so I'm really, really big on that too. Is like, make sure your outlets are GFCI protected. Um, Anything that's near a water source, just it's an cheap, easy fix.
Hmm.
If you can't do it, have an electrician. It's a couple $100, but again, it's going to prevent someone from really being being shocked or harmed, through electrical shock. But again, I go back to the furniture because, a lot of people don't think about it. You really have to really plan out your decor. And I know that aesthetically, designers are, they can make these places look amazing, but if you have some sort of birdcage chair that is, suspended from the ceiling, think about five people jumping on that thing to get a picture for Instagram. It's probably going to come out of the ceiling, and you're going to have a bunch of people laying on the ground, bruised up and probably angry.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you gotta kind of put yourself. Don't just think like, hey, if I use the space, like, what will be a danger? But yeah, like you said, think about like how many people are gonna come. Who are these people? What are they coming for? Like, what could they potentially do? Right, that could turn into a hazard. Right, so
Right. And
I think kind of like
unfortunately,
having that
Jasper,
mindset helps.
when you mix in the whole factor of, and I don't, drugs and alcohol, which is a prevalent part of our society today, it just exacerbates all these risks and hazards like a hundredfold. So what you might in your rational, sober mind wouldn't do is fair game when somebody is intoxicated or impaired.
Yeah, yeah, I remember I had somebody on the podcast. Man, I've done so many podcasts. I can't remember
Yeah.
who it was and where it was, but like somebody, somebody jumped in the water. So they had some type of pond or lake or I don't know what it was, but essentially somebody dove head down in the water and really
Ooh.
hurt
Yeah.
himself because it was shallow. And so, even like just putting up a little sign of like, hey, shallow water, don't dive. Right. It's like probably common sense to most people to not dive in water if you don't know how deep it is. But, those are, to your point, there, if there's any stimulating ingredients that have been consumed, whatever that would be. But like people might act a little different than what is common sense, right? So like kind of thinking through that and really thinking of like what are the most important hazards and like what kind of precautions can we put in place, even if it is common sense and we would never do it ourselves. um Putting yourself in like really thinking that through, I think can be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I sort of tell owners, like, think of it, managers, as threefold. Like, you have that initial property evaluation when you're acquiring the property. Like, what do I need to do to get this property up to the jurisdiction regulations or standards or whatever they're putting in place? And you do that. And then a lot of people sort of just drop off at that point. Like, they don't, and it's like, no, you have to carry this through to, you have a pre and post stay inspections. You need to all come up with a checklist, even sometimes a unique checklist for each property, and go through that checklist pre or post stay to make sure these things are being maintained. Again, like I say, I'm always surprised at the amount of fire extinguishers that I just don't see are accessible in properties, because they're unsightly. They hang on the wall. Somebody guest comes, they take it off the wall. They're goofing around with it. A lot of times spraying it in the home, which is a bad thing. But it gets shoved under a sink, it gets shoved in a closet, and then suddenly when you need it, where is it? And then things get out
Mm-hmm.
of control. But again, the whole, I always say some of our craziest incidents always come were from bachelorette parties. We always think, oh, college guys, maybe a bunch of college guys are going to get in there and drink and get wild. No, bachelorette parties. I don't know what happens there. The wine starts flowing. They get crazy. Things happen. You don't understand how they happen. There's no, But again, as the owner and manager, you're always on the defensive, or you're always playing detective to try to figure out what exactly has happened. Sometimes you never do. So because you just never get the truth.
I can imagine. Well, Vincent, I appreciate you jumping on the show here and providing
Sure.
some advice and some funny stories. Again, if you're listening, you want to learn more about the essential safety for short-term rental properties. Vincent wrote a book here. It's it's about 100 pages, so like you probably get through it pretty fast. And
Sure.
where can people buy the book, by the way?
Book is available on Amazon as a digital copy, or you can get a paperback. I really look at it as just it's great tool for the new owners or someone that's really starting to build their business to really. It's kind of broken up in several parts. The first part is really identifying what are common hazards around these types of properties. The second one is part of the book is really how to look for them and to address them. And then there's some other things in there I think are valuable resource like trust and safety, which evaluating gas, Internet of Things type devices you can put in there, which have been great for safety related items as we discussed. Um, you know, Privacy, protecting guest privacy and even the data that you collect is all personal information. How are you handling that? Are you keeping that secure? And then even a little section on event safety. And when you're dealing with large properties, people want to have weddings, they want to have large scale events, their music performances. And anytime you get above like 100, when someone's planning on 100 plus guests, even though you might not directly be involved in that safety or planning that event, you want to understand and make sure that the right things are in place to handle it. Like that many guests, like what do you do with all those cars? How are you going to handle if there's an emergency situation? How is there enough amenities? Things of that nature. So it just, although it covers basic functional safety, there's a couple other tips in there. And as I tell people, as we end this, I'm not really great on social media. I'm trying to get better, but I just love to interface with people. Just contact me, talk to me. What are your plans? What are your goals? Do you have a portfolio of homes that just need to be evaluated? That's what I love to do, and that's where I love to help people is just bring all their places up, all their properties up to just a safe standard.
Awesome. And the website is safehavensproperties.com.
Correct.
So and I know there's some resources out there. Yeah, there's some services that you offer. You can find more information about the book as well. So
Sure.
for everybody who wants to learn more, safehavensproperties.com. And with that said, Vincent, again, thank you for joining the show today. Appreciate you sharing your knowledge. And to the listeners, thanks for listening, and we will be back soon with another episodes. So we'll see
Yes.
you then.
Thank you, Jasper.